And we're back.
Is it working? It's working.
Yeah,
Excellent. Okay. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Chatter, a podcast from The Gist. Now, on today's show, we're talking to Joe Scott from Answers with Joe. This was a really exciting interview for me. I've been a big fan of his for a really long time. I really enjoy all of his videos on YouTube, especially when he's talking about really far out physics and science concepts. If you don't know his channel, you can check out some of the videos that we're going to be discussing in the description below. I'd probably recommend doing that before we start talking. And if you enjoy the show, you can share us on Facebook, Twitter. So let's get on with it. Here's the show. So yeah, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. Yeah, I've been a fan of yours for quite a while. I really enjoyed your video on the Global Consciousness Project, Double Slit Experiment, on the Fermi Paradox, and everything sort of Elon Musk related in general is always great. So it's a real pleasure to get to speak to you. Yeah. But I was really curious as to like where your love of science came from, like where you started, like to first figure out that that's really what you enjoyed, looking into, researching, learning about. Was it something that happened in school that you've like always been interested in, or is it something that you find once you were maybe at university or beyond?
I don't know. I think it's something that was just always there. I had a poster of the space shuttle up in my room. I was excited when I was a kid that I learned I had the same birthday as Albert Einstein, stuff like that. It wasn't really any one particular subject that got me into it. There wasn't any particular moment that I could point to and say that was where I knew that science was, the thing. I think I just always enjoyed it and was into it. And I never set out to do a YouTube channel about science. That was never a part of the plan. I was actually
that would have been
trying
serious
to
foresight to know it.
No, no, not at all. It was. I set out to basically use YouTube as a place where I could do stand-up comedy type stuff. Because I have a background in film, and we can talk about that. But I came from that, and then I also did some stand-up, and then stand-up it's sort of a lifestyle. I mean, you have to go to open mics 3-4 times a week till 1 a.m, and it was just something I wasn't capable of doing at the time, and it just wasn't really for me. And so I thought, well, I could use YouTube to do stuff like that. So in the beginning, it started off as a way to just do comedy. I would answer questions from people and do comedy videos out of it. And then one of the videos, that Fermi Paradox video, actually was the first one that really took off. I don't know if I could call it viral, but it did really well. Brought a lot of subscribers in, and they were interested in that kind of stuff, so they started asking more sciencey topics, and I just kind of pivoted with it, and I didn't mind going in that route because, like I said, I always enjoyed that kind of stuff, and it was sort of an excuse to do research and learn things, and so that's just kind of where it went.
Well, hopefully we'll have the same situation where something of ours will take off, I guess. I guess it's difficult to know at this point where it's going to go. Like, we're quite open to it. But
yeah.
You said about the Fermi Paradox being the thing that really kicked it off. Like, is there something that appeals to you about that particular like question? For anyone who doesn't know, the Fermi Paradox is basically why we haven't found any aliens yet. Maybe you can give a better summary of it than I would be able to.
Well, that's about 90% of it, what you just said. I mean, it's sort of a math thing when you look out at the universe and you see all the stars and just our galaxy alone, the sheer number of them. Even if life is incredibly rare, the sheer number of stars out there says that we should be seeing alien, civilizations all over the place, or at least signals of them, and yet we haven't found any. And the Fermi Paradox asks the question, why haven't we found any? And I wasn't really drawn to that particular topic for any reason other than I basically confession time. I basically stole that whole idea from Wait But Why. I've been following Wait But Why for a long time, and he did a great breakdown of all these different explanations for the Fermi Paradox that I just thought it was fascinating. So I did a video that I put that article basically in video form, and I gave credit to him and everything, and yeah, and it's an interesting topic, and it got a lot of views, and yeah.
What do you think the answer is? Do you have an opinion on it?
I mean, you always have to acknowledge the possibility that we just are alone, which one of these answers is right, I don't know. But the one that I'm leaning toward the most right now is that there probably is intelligent life out there somewhere, but they're communicating in ways that we just we can't, figure out. One thing I was thinking about, I haven't talked about this on a video or anything, but it seems like I read this somewhere. They were saying that, if you're near a black hole or anything that creates a lot of gravity, then, because of relativity, it slows down time. So there could be an alien civilization whose signals are maybe passing through or past a black hole, or maybe near a black hole, or near some kind of deep, center of gravity somewhere. And they are communicating and their signals are going out there, but because their experience of time is maybe tripled or quadrupled what ours is, we're actually picking up their signal, but their hello signal takes 5 years of our time to play out, to reach us. And so we're just on a different time scale than they are. So, I mean, there's all kinds of variables like that and factors like that say that, there might be something out there. It's just, we are just not capable of detecting it because of that difference in perspective and stuff like that.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. I hadn't even honestly thought about like relativity affecting how long it would take a signal to arrive. That's a really mad concept, actually. When you said that we haven't got any contact, we have the Y signal.
Yeah.
as small as that may be. And then did you see? Obviously, you probably did. You maybe did a video on it about the sun or the star anyway that has the really weird pattern of things orbiting it.
Tabby star.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's like suggestions it could be like some form of Dyson sphere, or basically what did you think of the theories that were being put forward about that star and the potential Dyson sphere around it?
Yeah. I really haven't done a whole lot of research on it, honestly. It's one of these things. I've got this big long list of topics, and it's kind of been on that list for a long time, and I haven't quite gotten to it yet.
Yeah,
the list seems to kind of keep getting pushed down because of new stuff that comes up. So I can't claim to be any kind of expert on it. So I have to give that disclaimer first of all. I guess I'm not somebody that immediately jumps to aliens on things like that. I usually lean toward there's probably some explanation we're just not thinking of right now. I mean, it's intriguing, it's interesting, but there's a whole lot of attention being placed on it, and as more research is done, I'm sure some interesting stuff's going to come out.
Yeah, like potentially the amount of focus that's been put on it is useful in that it draws attention to these like different ideas of ways that we could harness power of the sun, and it's an interesting way to look at thought experiments and to see, like, even just for physics students to play around with the idea, just for dissertations or whatever. So I know, like, as much as you're going to get hilarious sort of aliens guys, yeah, it's definitely like an interesting concept to talk about. But yeah, so then, like, in terms of your YouTube experience, like, what's it been like, essentially, sort of watching your audience grow, and then having so many people intrigued into what you have to say about science and about what's going on in the world and physics and everything. Like, do you get recognized very often?
No, it still hasn't happened yet. every once in a while I'll be out somewhere and I'll see somebody kind of doing a side glance or something, and in my head I'm like, do they recognize me? Do they know who I am? And then they don't say anything. I'm like, oh. No, like I go to I've gone to VidCon. Are you familiar with VidCon?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been to that the last 3 years, and each year obviously my channel has gotten a little bit bigger, and each year I go, I'm like, maybe somebody will recognize me, and it still hasn't happened yet.
Oh.
So no, I don't get recognized on the street or anything. But to answer your question about what it's been like with the growth of the channel and everything, there's a lot of things that people don't tell you about when your channel starts to grow and you start to get, a lot of comments and, you always hear about the bad comments, which, yes, they're there. There's always the trolls. And actually the one that I did on Monday really brought them out of the woodwork.
What was that?
The one on Monday?
Yeah.
It was about the eclipse.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I saw.
Yeah. Well, so, I guess I deserved it a little bit, but I keep getting people asking me if I could do another video on simulation theory. I get asked that all the time. So I know that people want to hear about it. And
well, for people who don't know what simulation theory is, do you want to explain it for us?
It's just the idea that maybe we're living in a simulation. There's a Oxford professor named Nick Bostrom who came up with this, or first put it into a paper and popularized it. Mm-hmm. Around the year 2000 or late 1990s, something like that. But he basically postulated that any advanced civilization that would be able to, and I'm paraphrasing here, by the way, but any advanced civilization that can do ancestor simulations probably would do ancestor simulations. And he broke it down into three things that I don't have in front of me, so I would screw it up if I tried to say it. But it was just basically making the argument that it's possible, feasible, that we are living in a simulation and just don't know it. And Elon Musk has popularized it quite a bit too.
Yeah, I think Elon Musk's explanation of it is that if we assume any level of technological advancement from what we have now, like looking at what we can do with VR, that eventually we will be able to simulate real life, and that as long as human society continues and we have any level of progression, that we will likely create thousands, if not millions, of simulations, and that brings the chance that we are the first one, like down to almost like infinitesimal numbers. And it's whether we want to believe that we're the only one, or whether we want to believe that we are one created by like this fantastic advanced human race. And if not, then why aren't we? And does humanity live that long? And there's a whole load of implications from it. But
there's a whole rabbit hole there.
Yeah. But yeah, sorry, do you want to continue there? You were saying about the eclipse video.
Yeah, no, so what it started off as was, I was just going to talk about the incredible coincidence that the moon and the sun appear the same size in the sky, like almost exactly the same size, just because of a fluke of math with the moon is 400 times, the diameter of the moon is 400 times smaller than the sun, but the sun is 400 times further away from the Earth than the moon is. So it's just this random coincidence that makes the eclipse as we experience it possible. And it was really supposed to be a video more just about coincidences, whether there's any meaning behind them, or if it's just that in sort of an infinite universe, anything is not only possible, but inevitable. And when that inevitability falls on you specifically, it might feel like magic or some, big meaningful thing, but it's really just an inevitability that happened to fall on you, And so that was really what it was supposed to be about. But because people have been wanting to hear about simulation theory, I kind of took that a step further and said, well, if there's this crazy coincidence, could it be that it's a simulation kind of thing? And so I went that way with it. And in the video, I really tried to, I took it to that woo-woo place, and then I tried to bring it back to Earth and say, now coincidences, the thing that I just said about the inevitability thing. But anyway, yeah, that brought out a whole bunch of, I somehow managed to do a video that pissed off both religious people and atheists. And brought out every flat earther on YouTube to deny that the eclipse actually happened.
My friend is he says that the smartest person he knows has told him, I don't believe there's a flat Earth, but look into it. And I'm really worried what's going to happen when he goes down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But aside from that, you're definitely not the first person to suggest that the coincidences of maths and science and everything are more than just coincidences. Like there's lots of theories that suggest that either we're in a simulation or we've like all of these coincidences have been put there by God, and that that human progress is like a video game almost, and you have to make the next step. And so our next jump is the moon and like a space elevator, and that, magically we found water on the moon underneath the surface, and that's like, that's the next step. So we've like got there, and that's our achievement. We've got water on the moon, and then we have to make the next jump and the next jump. And it, again, talking of rabbit holes, it's another great one to go down. Like it's really mind blowing when you think about, like you said, the just the coincidences that happen in science, and again, there's so much maths and things to explore that you're almost always going to get like random coincidences and things that align, and you're just like, oh, what is that?
Yeah.
And so, but
and the point that I really wanted to make with it, and this is something that it's almost like a spiritual thing. I hate to, use that term because it gets so loaded, but, when you look at, again, these random weird coincidences can happen to a specific person, and to that person it feels like magic, or it feels like paranormal, but really it's just when you are, we live these lives in this sort of myopic perspective where you can only experience the world through your senses, so that's like what you think of as reality and existence. But you're actually a part of this big, huge, infinitely complex, you could call it a machine, system, whatever you want to call it. And when these kind of random coincidences happen to you, it feels like magic. And some people go a paranormal or spiritual route. I tend to go a different, just sort of like, it just makes me feel connected to this vast system that I don't really get to experience outside of my own personal perspective. It kind of takes me out of that a little bit. And to that, it makes it feel special to me. And that's kind of where I was trying to go with my video. And I don't know if I sold that idea very well, but that's kind of where I lie on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I guess it's a pretty interesting thing to think about. Like I listened to a TED Talk the other day about how we all hallucinate our own conscious reality.
Yeah.
And the concept is there. It's like, we don't all see the same blue. Like that dress that came out was it like 2 years ago or whatever now, that sort of caused outrage, as everything does these days. But but it's I think it's shone like quite a big light on the idea that not everyone is looking at the same thing that you are. Mm-hmm. in every facet of life. And it blows my mind a little bit. Like you were talking about magic. Like we have magic in our hands. Like I'm sat in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and you're in America. Where are you? California? Dallas. Okay. Yeah. You're in Dallas, and we're talking in real time. Yeah. And right now, whilst talking to you on video, I could look up any piece of information in human history and have it in about 5 seconds. Like that is magic. Like,
yeah.
If you were to take,
can you imagine what would happen to you if you went back 200 years and told them that you had a little rectangle in your pocket that would allow you to talk to anybody on the planet if you press a certain pattern of numbers that glow from within? How quickly would you be burned at the stake?
Oh, so quickly. Like, yeah, like if you tried to like explain the concept that you have this little square thing that is more intelligent technically, or has more information than any human ever, or all humans ever. Like just there, right in that little box. Like, even if you went back 50 years and showed someone the storage capacity that we have now in like tiny little chips, and showed it to someone when they had like rooms filled for like a megabyte of data, I think it would blow people's minds.
Yeah. Well, and then you go forward from here 50 years. I mean, can we even imagine what kind of things I mean, we talk about the end of Moore's law. I think there's going to be technologies that are going to continue to accelerate the processing speed and the storage capacity and everything. But if we do continue on this path, like you just said, if you go back 50 years, people would be absolutely blown away by it. I think we can't even conceive of what's going to be happening. I mean, when the iPhone came out 10 years ago, it's 10 years old now. That was the first, smartphone of its kind.
Yeah.
Even that, they couldn't have imagined the things that it can do now. It didn't have the App Store on it. They didn't have third-party developers creating, cool stuff for it. It just had like very simple. You had a web browser and a phone and an email, and that was about it. A bunch of little parlor tricks that they were like, hey, look what you can do, and you can draw with your finger and stuff. But now if you went back 10 years, I think even Steve Jobs couldn't have imagined what the iPhone does now.
Yeah, I kind of wish he could see it. I think he'd be. I'd love to see what he would be doing with the company now, because as much as he was a dick, he brought the world some fantastic pieces of technology. Like he really did. He put that iPhone and the smartphone in the hands of every person on the planet almost at this point, and he's maybe responsible for the degradation of human society since then. But he's also given us some great. But it's a great argument winner when you can just Google something.
It's funny, especially when I'm visiting in-laws and stuff, and we get into these. Not always political, but it tends to go that route, unfortunately. But you get into these debates on things, and there's arguments, well, this, that, and the other, and I'm always like, we can look this up right now. Why are we arguing about it? Like, how are we still arguing as people? You can look it up,
Yeah, well, I had an infuriating moment on a train about 2 years ago. Maybe it wasn't even 2 years ago, but I was sat on a train from London to York, and I was sitting like opposite these four women, sort of middle-aged, and they were all playing on WhatsApp on their smartphones that they probably don't really know how to use, and they were all just like being like, oh, how do you do this? Oh, that's interesting. How do you do that? Or no, does anyone know how to do this? And I'm like, you're literally holding the answer. Like, it's in your hand. Like, but yeah.
It's astounding how lazy people are.
Yeah, but I think it just, maybe to that generation, it's just not as intuitive that they can go and find things like that.
Yeah.
But then there's the argument that it's killed the bar fight or the bar argument, where you're like, there's a great How I Met Your Mother episode that opens with them like, this is what happened before technology, and it was like them screaming at each other over what was the most popular food in America. Like, was it burgers or pizza or like chips or something like that? And then it was like, and this is what happened after, and they're all just sitting like round, and someone just goes, I wonder what and there's like, Google it, it's pizza.
Yeah, I have to admit, like I grew up when I was in college. That was pre all this. I'm a bit older, but every once in a while I'll be out at a party or with friends at a bar or something like that, and that kind of topic comes up. Like a song comes on, and I'm like, who sings this? Oh, is that no, it's not that guy. Who's the other? And then it used to be that would be like this hour-long conversation trying to figure out who sang this song or something, or what movie that was from or something. And now it's just like everybody whips out their phone. Oh, it's Peter Gabriel. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I guess we'll just sit here and stare in silence now.
Yeah, conversation moves on or doesn't.
Yeah.
Oh man! But then maybe that frees us to think of more important things. We're not considering the little trivialities and arguing over little minor points as to what's the most popular food or who sings this song. It frees our minds to talk about real things like Love Island and.
Well, what I was about to say was, it gives us the opportunity to talk about real things. It doesn't mean we take that opportunity.
Yeah. Well, talking about more, explorative ideas. My personal favorite video of yours is the Global Consciousness Project one that you did, and like that is to me the most, probably joint with the Double Slit Experiment, which I want to ask you about later, but it's the most mind-blowing thing that I think I've ever encountered in science. Like, and as you said in the video, like they're not trying to claim anything crazy, but it absolutely blows my mind. So basically, the Global Consciousness Project, again, maybe you can do a better job of explaining it than I can. But from what I remember, essentially they have a whole load of random number generators set up around the world, and they're monitoring when there is more correlation between the random numbers that are being generated, or there's like more numbers being repeated more often, and like measuring the correlation of that around the world with like disasters and like big maybe terrorist attacks or just like huge like events that sort of impact a lot of people. And that when they measured it on 9/11, that the correlation just went absolutely off the scale for about 3 days, and it started this number started to peak about 3 hours before the first plane hit the first tower, and then just continued to spike after that. And just that piece of information was I was just like, wow, I know nothing. Like
you know nothing, Jon Snow.
Yeah, exactly.
So I did that. Gosh, that was a long time ago. That was last summer when I shot that video, and then I did an interview with Adam. Oh, what was his last name? Shoot, his name was Adam something, but he was working on the iPhone app that was supposed to let everybody kind of be a part of the Global Consciousness Project, and it was called Entangled. That's what it was called.
Okay.
I don't think it's. I'm gonna actually get out my phone and look and see if it's out there.
Okay, well,
because I haven't been in touch with them since then, and it's not on my phone. I can tell you that.
Any luck?
Oh, you're back. No, it doesn't seem to be on there anywhere.
Okay.
Well, anyway, so yeah, I talked to Adam. It's gonna drive me crazy now. What his name was, but he put together that app and he was talking about it. Now, there's a lot of critics about the Global Consciousness Project, and that all came out of the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, so the Parrot Lab is what it stands for. And that was where they first started doing the whole random number generator thing. And what they're measuring basically is variations in the patterns of randomness in the numbers. So it can go up and down on this sort of oscillating scale kind of thing. And the nature of randomness is that sometimes you're going to, flip a coin 10 times and get 9 heads in a row. That's just randomness will do that, But I guess the question becomes, is that going to happen more often if you're, consciously trying to make that happen, or if there's some kind of emotional energy in the room or something like that would cause that to happen. And this does get into some woo-woo territory. I've actually been trying to stay away from woo-woo stuff lately. I say that I just did a video arguing that the eclipse was caused by a simulation, so I'm full of crap. But anyway, I would like to get back to that again, because I touched on it a year ago. I do find it to be an interesting topic, and I do want to know if there's any new advancements in that, or any new data that's been published on that kind of stuff. Weirdly, the longer I've been doing this channel and the more research I've done, the more I've become a skeptic on things like that.
Okay. Why do you think that is?
I think just because as I do more research, I read more stuff that, scientific data is usually a bit more skeptical about stuff like that. There's a reason why the science community has not embraced the Global Consciousness Project. It just doesn't fit into their current theories. That doesn't mean it's wrong. And I made that argument when I was talking with Adam that, science can have its own set of dogmas that people can get locked into. But I haven't been able to really go in and examine their data. I haven't been able to go in and really see if some of the claims that the skeptics make are wrong. It is something I would like to get back to at some point, because there's some seriously major implications.
Yeah, I like that. That's kind of what I wanted to get into, because obviously this is all very speculative, but like, to me, it basically implies that our consciousness isn't just in our brain. It's not just there, that there is something that connects everyone in the world in a way. And to me, that offers an explanation as to like mass hysteria, as to the kind of even in like politics and like the kind of cultural zeitgeist that we create for ourselves. It kind of implies that there is something that sort of helps to build that and hold it all together. There's like not quite a hive mind, but that's kind of like in the direction it's going. And basically, I wanted to get am I talking rubbish? Is it, or what's your take on it?
So, okay, when I was a kid, I grew up in this really, really small town here in Texas, and I worked when I was in high school at the local grocery store. There was one grocery store in town, and I worked there. I bagged groceries. I ran a cash register, that kind of thing. It was a high school job. And I was always struck by these random surges that we would get. In the middle of the day, out of nowhere, suddenly half the town was in our store. And there were lines, through the aisles and everything. And it made no sense. And I always wondered, like, is there some kind of weird connection everybody has subconsciously that says it's time to go to the store or something? I don't know. I know that's a very unscientific thing to say. There's no studies on that or anything, but I'm just saying, like, that was like a seed that was put into my head when I was a kid. I would just see these just random surges of people, and I was like, what is going on? But the implications of us having some kind of connection like that, or I think they call it non-local consciousness. They also use the word binary, but that's been kind of co-opted in a gender form now.
Yeah, I don't touch that with a 10-foot pole. I just don't know enough, and people who are claiming to know enough don't know enough, I think.
About the gender bit, or about the consciousness bit? No,
the gender bit. The consciousness thing, I feel that we all have a bit of a feeling in, because we're all there, into, like, depending on
we're not all there.
Well, but to an extent, like,
you can see that.
Oh, well, everyone gets understands the idea of consciousness and, like, sort of being able to, having your own voice inside your head and that sort of idea. I think it's more difficult to sort of get anyone else to really get into gender as to how the people who are identifying as non-binary feel. I think it's really difficult to really get a grasp on it, and therefore I find it really difficult to say one way or the other, especially when there's still research to be done. I think it's something you just have to keep an open mind about while there's while it's still so sort of undiscovered, because there's in terms of, like, chromosomes and gender, there's you got male and female, but that's not just what it is in their mind. And I think kind of have to you have to be willing to keep an open mind in terms of what's actually going on. Like, is it something in their mind? Is it something in their genes? Is it something in the way they've been brought up? Like, I think that there's too many factors potentially impacting it for people to say at this point one way or the other.
To me, that's just all a big social construct. If I don't care if somebody feels like they're a specific gender or they're binary, but I don't even know what half these terms mean. I'll be completely honest with you, but I don't need to know, because it's not my business.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that. If somebody else is feeling that way, have at it. I don't care. But I guess the only place I get a little sticky is because I feel like whether you're transgender, homosexual, whatever, I'm on your side. Live and let live. Do your thing. I want you to have all the rights that I have. I'm totally on your side. But I have had times in videos and in life where I just said the word wrong, or I said the wrong word, or I had some tiny little faux pas and somebody just jumps down my throat and acts like I'm, their oppressor or something. And I'm like, dude, don't fight against your own team. I'm on your side. Just, educate me, sure, if I'm saying something wrong, because I'm not out to say anything wrong. I'm certainly not out to offend anybody.
Yeah.
Not about that, of all things, So that's the only place where I get a little bit sticky is, they call them social justice warriors now. I'm not somebody that uses that word very much, or that term. But, there is sort of a segment out there of people that just get immediately offended about that kind of thing. And I'm like, you don't have to get offended with me. Just tell me. Yeah. And I'm not out to, but that's why I say that's more of a social construct for me.
Yeah. No, that's fair. But sorry, back to the Global Consciousness Project.
Little rabbit hole there.
Yeah. It's tangent, it's fine.
No, so I guess where I was going with that, so there's, to kind of tie in the whole Global Consciousness Project and the Double Slit Experiment and all that, there's a lot of connections that are being made, and if it works out, that's awesome. But, there's gaps in our knowledge. When John Archibald Wheeler did the, I believe it's called the Delayed Choice Experiment.
Yeah.
So in that case,
do you want to explain that just before you go on it? Just because I pretty much know what you're talking about, but I'm aware that this is like pretty obscure physics stuff that we're talking about, and anyone who's not like, I know about it because of your channel and because like one of my best friends is a physicist. Well, he studied physics at university, so like I just always talk to him about this stuff. But I'm aware it's not maybe what everyone is doing in their spare time. Sure.
Well, I can back up and talk about the double slit experiment because I don't think we actually covered that.
Yeah.
And understand, one of my favorite comments that anybody ever said, and it was a burn on me. Somebody burned me in the comments, but I loved it. He said, listening to you talk is like listening to my plumber talk about physics while he's working on my toilet. And I laugh about that because that's true. I'm not a scientist. And so I always have to say that, like, I read about this stuff. I have I think I'm maybe a little bit more knowledgeable about it than the average bear, but I just understand you're getting this not from a scientist. So I can explain this to the best of my ability. It is very dumbed down because I'm dumb myself. So, but the double slit experiment.
I think that's doing yourself a discredit, but
Well, I just never want people to confuse me with an actual scientist because I'm not one. But okay. So the double slit experiment came about because there was this wave-particle duality argument back in the early 20th century. They were debating whether or not light traveled as a particle or if it traveled as a wave. So if you take, let's just say, imagine a cardboard box and you put one line, cut a little slit into this cardboard box and you shine a flashlight through it, what you'll get is basically, on the other side where it's projected onto a screen, you'll get basically a line. It's not a perfect line, obviously. It kind of spreads out, but it's a line. And then they did that with two lines, and what you get is an interference pattern, which is kind of hard to explain in audio form, but it's basically the two, there's basically two sets of waves that come out of the different slits and interfere with each other. So what you get on the wall behind is in the middle, there's a big thick line, and besides that, there's two not so thick lines, and then it kind of gets lighter and lighter out from there, but they call that an interference pattern. And that's because of the waves colliding with each other on the other side of that slit. So that made people think it travels as a wave instead of a particle, because if it was a particle, you would have two lines on the other side.
Not a whole bunch.
Right. Like just like when you had the one slit and you had that one line, if they traveled as a particle, you would have two lines because they were traveling straight through, like you can imagine BBs through a slot. But they didn't get that result. They got this interference pattern, which said to them that light's traveling as a wave. So where it gets really crazy is when I say it gets really crazy, it actually keeps getting crazier the more you talk about it.
Yeah.
that's what got me about the double slit experiment. I think maybe that's why people like that video. Is like the more you go into it, it just keeps getting weirder and weirder. But so they decided, okay, so the light is colliding with itself on the other side. So you can imagine all these little like pool balls going through the slit, traveling as a wave, colliding with each other, creating this interference pattern. So what they said was, let's try this one at a time. What if we fired electrons or photons through one at a time? Would we get that two slit pattern on the back as if it was a particle? So they tried that, and they still got the interference pattern. And the reason that's mind-blowing is, what is it interfering with?
Yeah.
If you're shooting them through one at a time.
Well, itself.
Well, it's interfering with itself. So this gets into all kinds of crazy quantum physics where before it manifests itself as a physical thing, it travels as a potentiality. It's a wave potential. So what it's basically doing is it's going through both slits at the same time and then colliding with itself on the other side. When it gets to its ultimate destination, that's when they call the waveform collapse. So that itself is crazy. That speaks to the nature of particle physics and how they are. Everything at its elemental particle is just a waveform potential, which is kind of mind-blowing in itself.
Yeah. Just the idea that it's going through both slits at the same time and colliding with itself is just mad. The implications are crazy.
Yeah.
So to me, what that implies is that, I could be wrong here. We can go further down the rabbit hole about the other experiment you wanted to talk about there. But the implication of that at that stage to me is that nothing exists unless it's being observed.
Oh, we haven't gotten to that part yet.
Yeah.
So the part they got, this is where, so your mind is dripping out of your ear because the idea that this one particle is splitting into two and colliding with itself, and it's just a waveform potential and all that kind of stuff. Well, they decided, well, what if we put some kind of detection device on one of the slits to determine which one of these slits it's going through, because maybe it is going through both at the same time. We want to see this, right? They wanted to see this happening. So they put up a detector on one of the slits, and that is when it actually started behaving more like a particle. They were actually getting the two lines in the back that they would have expected with a particle. They weren't getting the interference pattern anymore.
Yeah.
So then the big mind blow becomes the particles behave differently if they're being observed.
Yeah, sorry, I was getting ahead of myself. I just get excited about this. So basically, as I said, my thought is that the implication is that right now, because no one is looking at my bedroom upstairs, that it doesn't exist. It's in superposition with itself. That could be like a bit of an oversimplification, but it's kind of if a tree falls in the forest, is anyone around to hear? And no one's around to hear it. Does it make a sound?
Right. And so then people we can keep going down this rabbit hole here.
Yeah, let's go a bit further.
And some of these people that are really into simulation theory argue that that's an argument for simulation theory, because that's like a way of managing processing speed or a clock speed of whatever is running the simulation. Is the idea that, like you just said, if your bedroom right now doesn't exist because nobody's looking at it, then the great computer in the sky is not having to process that, right? Because that's basically how video games work.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I subscribe to this theory, but there's some interesting concepts there, and a lot of people take what we're talking about with the double slit experiment and kind of translate it into simulation theory. So all this stuff is connected in weird ways. But so we have the double slit, we have the particles going through two slits at the same time, which is impossible, but apparently possible. And then you have the fact that they behave differently when they're being observed. The waveform collapses when it's being observed. So the delayed choice experiment, which is what we were about to talk about earlier. Yeah. That's John Archibald Wheeler. He was a University of Texas professor. Go Texas. But he I couldn't get into the specifics on this with you because I'm not that familiar with it. But the basic gist of his experiment was, I'm going to try to get this as right as I possibly can, that he had two. Wait, hang on. Let me get this right. So he had a beam of light that was split. One of them went straight through and did like the double slit experiment on its own, and the other had basically a gate that it had to go through.
Okay.
And the gist of the experiment was that something changed in the gate after the light passed through it. So the behavior of the light was affected by something that happened in the future, basically. I think I'm saying this very wrong.
Okay, so hang on. So
in a very confusing way.
Let's just back up for 2 seconds. So it was being observed at the gate, isn't that it? Or no?
Well, I don't. Yeah. So it was like you can imagine. To simplify it a little bit, you can imagine they're doing a double slit experiment, but they turned the detector on after the particle went through, and it was still behaving as if it had been observed.
Yeah, okay,
so,
that's a better way to explain it.
It was far more complex than what I just said.
Yeah,
but that was basically the idea, was that something that happened in the future affected the present. Or I think I'm saying that right.
Yeah, a friend of mine actually attempted to use this theory. And he wanted to follow through with it and never actually did, and I'm really sad that he didn't. Basically, what he wanted to do was go and do his exam and then study when he got home.
Oh.
Because I think they did like another experiment where basically they put like 2 sets of people, like a real group and a control group in a room, and they showed them all a bunch of random words flashing on the screen. The same like list of words, okay? And then after that, they got everyone to write down the words they remembered. And then they took one group and showed them 10 words out of the group that they first showed them again. And that group had been more likely to write down the words that they had been shown afterwards than the other group who hadn't been shown those words. So basically the implication was that they were remembering things that hadn't happened yet.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is the same thing that you're talking about, but I have heard about a study. I don't know. Again, I don't know how scientific this was, but some professor or somebody that was curious about this basically took his class and he gave them a pop quiz, and then he took half the class the next day and gave them the answers to all the questions that were on the pop quiz, and then he graded the pop quiz, and the people who had been given the answers afterwards generally got higher scores.
Yeah, I think it's like the same vein of experiments.
Yeah.
But that was the theory upon which my friend wanted to come home and study. But it was his last exam when he was claiming to do this, and I knew it wasn't going to happen because he was just going to come home from his last exam and go get wasted. But I really wish that he had done it to see how he would have done.
I mean, that's an interesting thought. I don't think that. I wouldn't do that. That's kind of crazy.
Oh no, that's putting a lot of hands in speculative science.
Yeah, well, this is one of those things. Again, it's one of the things about sort of the. I'm rambling here. The Global Consciousness Project. It's not necessarily a one person, one coin flip kind of thing. It's millions of coin flips. It becomes statistically significant after that. So, and even then, it's just a small amount of significance. But yeah, so I wouldn't use that as a study technique. But I find it interesting.
We're not endorsing that.
Yeah, no, I'm not endorsing that at all.
Okay.
Study before the test. That's still the tried and true method.
Yeah.
But you know, when you have ideas like that, and again, these things have to be tested a lot before you can really hang your hat on them. But when you have ideas like the delayed choice experiment that shows that on the quantum level, things in the future can affect the present, and then you look at things like the whole global consciousness 9/11 thing, where the random number generators started acting differently hours before the plane hit, and then you have Stuart Hameroff coming up with the what's it called? I don't have it in front of me. Shoot. he came up with this idea that our brains can interact with quantum information, that it works on a quantum level. So what you wind up with is the idea that there's possibly like a quantum consciousness field out there that we are all tapped into in some way. And
I thought you said you wanted to get away from the woo-woo stuff.
Yeah, I know. But honestly, that's about as spiritual as I get. It's interesting stuff that we don't know the answer to, and it does get into spiritual realms, and people might just call that God, but at least it seems somewhat plausible according to science, and there's a lot of scientists, I'm sure, that would totally disagree with me on that, but that's about as far as I go into spirituality right there.
That's fair.
But it is interesting. It's interesting.
If nothing else, it is fun to speculate about.
Sure. Yeah.
Moving on anyway from our crazy discussion there. I wanted to actually ask you, like, is there something that right now you're really excited about in science? Is there something that's like you're thinking is this next big thing that's going to blow up and be, the thing that everyone's looking at in terms of, wow, science has done it again? That sort of idea? Or, is there something that you're just really, exploring at the minute and sort of is blowing your mind a little bit?
Let's think about that one. I mean, the immediate thing that pops into my head is battery technology.
Okay.
I talked about supercapacitors a couple weeks ago, maybe about a month ago, and
yeah, that was really interesting.
The things that are coming up with material science, I really think those are going to change the way we live in ways that we can't really figure out right now. Are you familiar with Isaac Arthur?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, yeah, we've collaborated a couple of times, but he's got an amazing channel. He actually did a video about a week or so ago that was about technologies that are going to change our lives. What was it, kind of sort of the kind of technologies that we're not thinking of right now that are going to change our lives in the future. And he was basically comparing how somebody today would live versus how somebody in the future would live. And a lot of the stuff that we talk about when we talk about science, going to Mars, and we talk about space stuff like that, and new space travel engines and whatnot. I mean, that's fun and exciting and sexy, but there's things going on right now that would actually affect our lives. The fact that we have people on the International Space Station doesn't affect you and me.
Yeah.
But again, the fact that we can look up any piece of information in the world in a rectangle in our pocket, that changes our lives. Yeah. So he was basically talking about the kinds of things like that are going to really affect us. And some of that stuff gets into Neuralink.
Yeah. Where do you stand on that?
In the near future, I think it's great because it's only going to help disabled people to be more able to live a normal life. That's the basic thing that they're working on right now, is making it so that people who are paraplegics can operate exoskeleton robot type things to get around in, or even be able to function and communicate with a computer in a way that they can't now. I don't see any downside to that. That's amazing. When you start to get into other stuff like us being able to completely integrate our brains with the internet, sometimes I think we need to get away from the internet.
Yeah,
with stuff that's out there. So I get a little leery about that.
Where I have problems with it is that I don't like the idea that, so people can already track what we're doing on our phones, laptops, everything, like to crazy extents that people probably don't even realize. Like it's terrifying. Like I don't even know if it's helpful, but I constantly have my location on my phone off. I never use my data unless I absolutely have to. I just because, and that sounds paranoid, but I feel like there's kind of a privacy barrier there that I'm not quite okay with crossing. And I kind of already have, because like probably they can check everything I'm doing with the phone, and you know, the NSA is a fucking powerful organization. But
hi NSA.
Yeah, hi.
Throw that in, say nice, be nice.
Yeah, yeah. Don't hurt me. I'm just speculating. Then where I have the problem there is this idea that if something is genuinely integrated into your brain, then you might be at risk of being hacked, essentially. Or I know that sounds like a bit sort of science fiction-y that your brain could get hacked, but they technically already do it with the way people advertise, and the way media is designed, and the way social media works, and the way
social media.
Yeah, like technically our brains have already been hacked to an extent. An extent, like, to use a really poor word for it, but like that's where I have the problem with it, and I don't know if I'd be okay, honestly, with the Neuralink thing. And as much as I see all these fantastic upsides, once you cross to that point where you're connected to the internet, or you're accessible to anyone that has the technology to get in, because if something's going out, there's a way to get back in, and especially if you're downloading things, or if you're like looking things up, I worry about the implications of it. And is that something you get concerned about, or?
Totally. Yeah. And so what we're looking at right now, I get really
like the microchipping there's a couple of companies, one in Sweden, I think one in Wisconsin, that have like microchipped their employees to pay for stuff. Yeah, like that just seems unnecessary. It's like you've got a wallet, you have a phone with Apple Pay on it or whatever. I
don't get the point of that.
So I get, and obviously religious people are like mark of the beast, etc., etc.
Well, anytime you're talking about putting microchips in people, I mean, they've been talking about that from the 80s, and schizophrenics who think that somebody's already done that to them, and it's sort of one of those touchy subjects. I don't know that I would submit to somebody putting a microchip in me, although I don't think it would have let them read my mind or anything like that. But
no, I don't think the microchip lets people read your mind. But there's definitely the potential for their like secret location trackers to be put in there, or once you get into the whole Neuralink thing where their brain could be in the internet, there's definitely that sort of possibility. Yeah.
It's not something that keeps me up at night. The sort of privacy thing, I kind of feel like we've lost all our privacy already. It's already, it's just gone. It's like death. What can you do about it? It's going to be there. And I guess, I don't know. It's not something that I think about too much. But when you talk about Neuralink, and when you talk about linking our brains with the internet and stuff like that, there's definitely a concern there. For very good reasons. And the people who are the proponents of it are like, yeah, but it would be just like what we're doing now. You would have to be able to, like, if we were communicating telepathically using Neuralink or something like that, it would still be me saying hi and then you saying hi back. It would still be like opening up a conversation. It wouldn't be like I just jump into your brain and control your arm or something,
But I don't know. I feel like there's the potential for abuse of anything like that. The internet's
potentially, yeah.
The internet's great, but it unfortunately shines a big light on parts of society maybe that people don't want to see, and that's probably why you get the people wanting to censor the internet and the kind of anti-net neutrality campaigns and whatnot. I think, I don't know. Maybe I'm just, because I've grown up with the internet, I know what it's like. But I feel like it's kind of a perfect reflection of human society.
In good and bad ways.
Yeah, exactly. Just like human society has both horrendous and fantastic parts. You can't ever regulate anything to be perfect, is my point, I guess.
No, yeah. So this kind of goes into something I've never really talked about on the channel, but it's a thought I've been having recently. And, you always hear people talking about the singularity. My thought is we're already in the singularity. It's just something that's happening in long span of time that maybe got started in the Industrial Revolution. I mean, when you look at the big picture, humans lived the same way roughly 200 years ago that they did 5,000 years ago, with minor improvements,
Yeah.
But in the last 200 years, and even in the last 10 years, the amount of advancement has just been off the charts. And I don't know that it's ever going to come to this big moment where, everything comes into alignment and, like Ray Kurzweil might talk about. But I think we're kind of living it right now. And there's an upside to it. Obviously, the technology is wonderful, and technology in general has always improved our lives. It just always has.
Yeah.
And I think it will continue to. That doesn't mean it doesn't come with a downside. And the thing that gets me a little depressed sometimes is, especially with social media and the internet and everything. I mean, yes, like we were saying, all the world's information is in this rectangle in our pockets, but that doesn't mean it's all true, because anybody in the world can put friggin' anything out there, and you can pull it up and say, well, they say that there's cabbage on Mars. Well, it's got to be true, So,
that's
so
the obelisk on, is it Mars's moon?
Yeah.
That sort of, we find this photo and it looks kind of like a pyramid, like there's clearly pyramids on Mars, and that sort of lunacy.
But we're in this transition phase right now where we have all this power of social media and internet and everything, and I hate to even use the word fake news anymore because it's become co-opted, but it is a thing. It's not what some people say it is, but it is something that affects our society. I see it all the time in the comments of my videos, the things that people believe these days. It's absolutely insane. And I'm optimistic enough to think that we're going to find a solution. I'm optimistic enough to think that this is just a transitionary period, and that we'll get to another side where we'll figure all this out. We'll figure out how to make sure that the information that we're getting is accurate, because we have entered this phase right now where it's kind of like we all have our own facts, and my fact is as good as your fact. Well, no, I mean, we're going to get past that, I think. We are going to find a way past that, but right now it's just really ugly and gross. But to kind of get back to the Neuralink thing, a lot of things that we live through and experience today, 10, 20 years ago, none of us would have said okay to,
Yeah.
It's a slow moving process, and I think by the time Neuralink, if it becomes a thing, there's still a possibility it never actually becomes a thing. But if it does, it's going to happen in a time frame that we'll be ready for it when it happens. It won't feel like a big crazy thing by the time it becomes a thing, because it will have happened slowly and we've adjusted to it, just like we've adjusted to everything else. That's my opinion.
Well, that's very fair. I think that's actually a pretty nice place to leave it. Thanks
I'm
very
frozen,
much.
right?
Yeah. Well, thanks very much for coming on the show anyway. It's been a real pleasure getting to chat to you. I've had a lot of fun.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, you can share us on Facebook, Twitter, maybe even give us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Next week, we've got Stephanie Farnsworth from Stand Up Magazine on the show, and Elizabeth Voss from Disobedient Media. So until then, thanks for listening.